Hello. I suspect if you're watching this video, you run a marketing agency and you've got one of a couple problems. You're either not making money on your projects and you're not sure why, or your team is telling you that they're really busy and it feels like they should have excess capacity. And for one or both of those reasons, you have been led to believe or told that time tracking is your answer and you're trying to figure out more about it. So, that's what I'm here to talk about. By the way, my name is Ryan Watts. I'm one of the original founding partners at Upsourced. Upsourced is a CFO and outsourced accounting firm for marketing and creative agencies. If there is one topic that we've been asked about or we've spoken about more often than any other in this domain, I suspect it's probably time tracking, which is ironic for such a tactical and detail-oriented and in some cases controversial sort of a topic. So anyway, I want to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes providing kind of the definitive overview on how you as an agency owner should think about time tracking, why you should care, how you might go about implementing, and ultimately what it can do for you. Okay, so with all that, let's get into it. And let's start with just specifically why. Like, why is time tracking something that you feel like you should do or you've been told to do or you're wondering whether you should do? Listen, in general, let me start with just 30,000 feet. If you run a professional service firm of any kind for that matter, but specifically a marketing services firm, the most important metric in your business is gross margin. Gross margin is a measure of how much money or how much profit you're making on the core thing you do, right? It's your revenue less the costs incurred to service that revenue. Ignoring all the other overhead costs and operating expenses and all this kind of stuff. It's really just the revenue and the cost to service that revenue. In other words, after taking out the cost to service the revenue, how much money am I making on the core thing I do? If I'm earning a good gross margin, I will for sure have a profitable marketing agency. And if I'm not earning a good gross margin, I will not. Gross margin is the whole ballgame. When we talk about gross margin here at our firm, we talk about it in the context of a framework we've developed called the margin triangle. The margin triangle is really just to signify that, or to visualize rather, that there are two and only two inputs to gross margin that you should think about or optimize for as an agency owner. Those two inputs are project margin and utilization. Okay, project margin and utilization. So if I have a gross margin problem, I have one of two of those problems, a project margin problem or a utilization problem. A utilization problem would be, hey, listen, I am paying fixed wages for people whose job it is to service my revenue, but I don't have enough work for them, right? Too much of their time is being spent unutilized, not earning me revenue, right? That would be a utilization problem. A project margin problem would be my team is doing work. It's just when they're doing work, we're not earning enough money relative to their cost rate for me to generate a sufficient gross margin, right? So the margin I'm earning when my team is utilized is not sufficient. So it's one of those two things. Without going into a lot of detail on very detailed mechanics for how I calculate those two things, suffice it for me to tell you that both calculations require me to have time. The inputs to our inventory as agencies, as service businesses, is time, right? And so for me to know, hey, how much money did I make on project X? Like it was a $100,000 website project. Well, I got to know how many hours did I spend and what did I pay for those hours? And in order for me to know, is my team fully utilized? I got to know how many hours were they available, and of those available hours, how many did they spend doing service work versus not service work? Both of those things require me to have time data, which is why time tracking is a thing that we and lots of people like us continue to recommend, and I wouldn't say insist, but almost insist. Now, just pause. You might be listening to this and thinking, wait a minute, we're getting by without doing time tracking. Why do I absolutely need that? And I will at least admit to you that there are some fringe cases where we've got agency clients of ours even who don't track time and have found good ways to approximate the cost incurred on a project so that they could get an approximation of project margin, and also to approximate the time being spent on client work versus non-client work so they get an approximation of utilization. It can be done, and generally speaking, it can really only be done by the kind of agencies that have a high volume of homogenous work. So, hey, I have a bunch of projects and they all look pretty much the same. So it's pretty clear for me to know how many projects this person's working on and what they're spending their time on. But the vast majority of agencies do not have a high volume of homogenous work. They have a smaller volume of more heterogeneous work, things that look a little more bespoke, custom, different from time to time, which is why scoping is so important and pricing is so important, and all those things require good data inputs, and time is kind of at the cornerstone of all those things. But anyway, ultimately, if I need to, and I'll just make the kind of very blanket statement, which is there are very few serious agencies who have achieved a real level of revenue, profit, and scale, which is kind of mid seven figures or more. Very few of them I have witnessed do it without tracking time. I'm not telling you it's impossible. I'm telling you doing so is the exception, not the rule. And so unless you want to try to play the roulette wheel and pretend that you are the exception, you should start building a good time tracking mechanism so that you have good, adequate data for you to be able to optimize on your project margins every single month, and for you to be able to dial in on utilization ranges so you know when you need more people and when you need fewer people. Okay, so that's the why. Now, let's say that you are not currently tracking time, or you are and it's a failed experiment, and so you're starting from scratch. And you're trying to figure out, okay, great, how do I do that? Listen, I could cover a lot of different things here, but let me try to give you a pretty brief overview on how I would go about it. The first thing, and by the way, this is where all time tracking initiatives fail, is setting proper expectations and alignment with the team, the people for whose time you need. So when you're rolling out or re-rolling out a time tracking process for your team, just like I did with you, you got to start with the why. Why are we doing this? Realize, first of all, that we're all running creative pursuits, right? And so naturally speaking, this is going to feel very detailed and very process oriented, very bureaucratic. And so there's going to be a natural kind of distaste for it. But also there's going to be this kind of skepticism and almost sort of conspiracy-like concern about, why are they looking for time tracking data? Are they trying to figure out what I'm doing with my time? Are they trying to figure out, can they do without me? Am I being laid off? Is this a cost-cutting initiative? All these things, right? So naturally, you're going to hear a lot of people resist time tracking, and they're going to use whatever words they use, but deep down, it's just this very human self-preservation emotion. So you got to reach them with a good why. Why are we doing this, right? And listen, the why, of course, is exactly what I explained to you. Hey, team, this is not about micromanaging what you're doing or making sure you're working in specific areas. It's not even really making sure that you're spending enough hours necessarily. It's just, as an organization, we are trying to make more money so that we can hire more people to help you, so that we can grow the organization to give you more opportunities, so that we can afford more raises, right? Obviously, we're all here to generate profit so we can reinvest it in ourselves and keep the party going. In order for us to do those things, we got to understand, are we pricing our projects appropriately? Are we scoping them appropriately? Are we ultimately delivering on the margin we had hoped? And do we have enough work for you? If not, let us get some more. And do we have too much work for you? And if we do, let's get you help. All these things are for you. We're doing this to help you. And so that's kind of step one, laying the foundation of the why. Now, listen, the next thing you got to do is make sure all of your actions support your why and they don't undermine your why, right? It's very easy to get up there and pay lip service. And then you do things like you set utilization goals. Like, hey, Sally, you have an 80% utilization goal. And when you're 60% utilized, I come knocking and say, hey, Sally, why aren't you 80% utilized? What are you doing? That kind of stuff. Time tracking should not be used as a performance management tool for individuals. I don't want to get into all the details for why. Main reason is that most people cannot influence their own utilization. Your job is to generate revenue for them to service. And so they only have as much work as you give them, generally speaking. So don't set utilization targets. It's a management tool for you, it's not a performance management tool for them. So don't set utilization goals. Don't hold people accountable to utilization targets. And also make sure that we're using the information. So if we tell them, hey, this is why we're collecting it. Okay, well, great. Let's make sure we show them the outputs of their inputs. Here's our project margin data, and let's have conversations. Oh, gosh almighty. So listen, hey, by the way, Sally, we sold you a $100,000 website project. We were thinking that in order for us to do a good job, that kind of included 20 hours of your strategy. So if you get in there and you think it's going to be a lot more, a lot less, let's talk about it. And then at the end, let's talk about where we ended up. And to the extent it differed from our expectation, let's talk about that. I think nothing sort of undermines an initiative like something that feels empty. Right? Oh, I'm just tracking time, but who knows? It's going into this black box. I don't know why it's being used or how it's being used. And so let's show them, not just tell them why, let's show them the outputs of the why. The last thing I would just make clear to them is, again, bad data causes us to make bad decisions. So one human thing that often will happen when a time tracking initiative rolls out, and I hear this is like a common refrain for time tracking haters, is that garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, it's not worth the paper it's printed on, whatever. And by the way, I do think poor time tracking initiatives do generate bad information, which therefore create bad decisions. But that is a function. That's just a communication and alignment problem, and a leadership and culture problem. That's not a indictment on time tracking. So again, as long as the team understands how and why you're using it, and that, hey, listen, if it took you 5 hours, if I told you to take 20 and it only took you 5, hooray, that's great. I just want to know about the 5. If I told you it would take 20 and it's actually taking 40 and you're worried I'm going to come back to you and be upset with you because you spent too long, I'm not. I just need to know the information, so next time I sell that project, I charge more for it. You have to make sure you say those things, and then you have to make sure that your actions don't betray your words. You don't come through and are upset with those people because they spent more. Now, listen, it's possible that they spent more and they shouldn't have, and it's a training thing. Again, I don't want to go down all the rabbit hole, but just make sure that you're approaching them constructively. Hey, I'm so thankful for this information. This is not your fault at all, but it actually should have taken 20. So let's figure out how I can help you only spend 20 in the future. Okay, so that is the foundation. The how you roll it to your team, how you communicate why it's needed, how you align with them, and how your actions continue to support the words that you've used. That is the most important thing that you can possibly do, and that is where these things ultimately go off the rails. Okay, so let's assume that you've done that well. The team gets it. We're bought in. We understand, we know that we need this information. What's the right kind of next step? Well, I'd say most people emphasize the tool as the next step. Okay, great, I'm time tracking. What tool should I use? And that's where a lot of our questions will come from. What tool do you like? What tool don't you like? For that reason, I'm intentionally not going to mention any software. Okay, there are a lot of pieces of software, and for the most part, with the right process, they all work. They're basic. You get it. We're tracking time. I need projects and hours per project by days and minutes and whatever. It's not rocket science. So I'm not going to talk about software, because what I want you to focus on next is not software. I want you to focus on process. How are you going to roll this out, right? And so again, the process that I would recommend is that everybody has a daily expectation. In a perfect world, I have a many times per day expectation. I am tracking time as I'm going along. A sort of post-mortem, it's Friday afternoon, let me try to figure out where I spent my time for the week. That is going to result in far less useful information than In the moment, I'm doing 2 hours on this, I'm doing 3 hours on this, I'm doing 2 hours on this. One tooling thing that often helps this is that at this point, pretty much all time tracking software includes timers, little things that you can use that allow you to start and stop while you're doing work. That is a habit to get into, but when you can get in that habit, that creates far more granular, useful information. I can tell you here at Upsourced, the vast majority of our team uses timers to track their time. It doesn't take them any extra, it's just part of their routine, and so it's easy, it's second nature. It takes a minute to get there, but at a minimum, start with a daily expectation of time tracking. Have one person who owns time tracking compliance, making sure that everybody enters their time. The expectation is that they are checking the compliance at least weekly. So I'm popping in on Friday and making sure everybody has all their time up to date and submitted by the end of day Friday. That person, by the way, should check in, Wednesday and give friendly nudges. Hey, listen, I'm checking this. It absolutely must be submitted by Friday, but we're going to get better information if you just kind of bake this into your daily routine. But all that to say, daily tracking, weekly monitoring, and 40 hours should be entered every week. I hear a lot of kind of luminaries, thought leaders, whatever, suggest, we don't care about all your hours. I don't care about your PTO. I don't care about your lunch. I don't care about any of this stuff. I just care about your client hours. And I agree. I just care about your client hours. But let's say that it's Friday and it's 5, and I see that you recorded 12 client hours on Monday and Tuesday combined, and no client hours on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It might be that you only did client hours on Monday and Tuesday, and you just didn't do any client hours on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It might also be that you didn't enter your time on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't know. The only way for me to know is go ask you, or for me to require you to enter 40 hours. And when I see 40 hours, I see 8 hours on Wednesday and they were all internal, or PTO Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, boom. I know you're done, and I know you had 12 client hours. Your team should be recording 40 hours every week. Now listen, you should have a daily tracking with weekly monitoring. Every new initiative is gonna have poor compliance. I believe that in general, continuing to re-emphasize the need, continuing to have the person stay on top of others will build the habit, and the habit will take over. However, you might find yourself in need of a carrot and a stick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what those carrots and sticks would be, but again, imagine that you have incentives for people who are consistently providing their time tracking, and you have disincentives for people who are consistently not providing time tracking. Early on in our time journey, we needed carrots and sticks before we built the habit, and we no longer have carrots and sticks. Okay, the other thing I'll add from a workflow perspective is just, in order to facilitate the use of this information such that we then show our team the outputs, be very thoughtful about how you set people and projects up inside time tracking. So one of the biggest challenges in an agency environment is that we're tracking project information and people information in a lot of different systems, right? We have the payroll system where their pay, where the pay information lives, and then of course we have time tracking, and then we have possibly our proposal system where maybe revenue lives, and then we have project management system where perhaps like milestones live and things like that. If I'm not being really, really thoughtful about how I name my projects in each of those systems, then it gets really difficult for me to smash it all together at the end of the quarter or the month or whatever it is, right? So ideally, I have a project code system where it's project 0001, 0002, and that way I can do really nice formulaic lookups on spreadsheets to say I'll grab revenue from this section, and I'll grab hours from this section, and I'll grab people's names, and I'll grab but there's the many ways that you can do it. All I'll say is just make sure you're being very thoughtful and that you set up your system in such a way that you're calling things the same in each of the places such that you can use it at the end of the period. Okay. Number 3, I'm not going to recommend software, but once you have alignment and you have a process, obviously a fast follower to that is going to be a tool. Lots of things out there. Just make sure that you're using the thing that you're paying for. And again, the last thing, and I've already said it a bunch of times, but just make sure there's a really good feedback loop. You are gathering data for data's sake is the quickest way to undermine the legitimacy of the things you ask. So make sure that you take the information and you're preparing good project margin data that you're sharing out with your team, and you're having good postmortems on those. Not in a punitive way, right? Because if you're beating people up about the hours, the hours they're recording, then they're going to subconsciously start to manipulate those hours. So make sure you're being really constructive. But to the extent that we're coming way under on projects, hooray, maybe. Let's understand why so that we can take some learnings. And to the extent that we're coming over, we're having overruns. Hooray, or not hooray, bad. But let's talk about those things so we can discuss learnings. Same with utilization. Let's have conversations about utilization across teams. Oh, this team seems very overutilized. What's going on? How can we help them? This team seems underutilized. Now listen, you might think to yourself, I'm going to have to thin out the herd there. That's agencies, that's going to happen. But make sure when you're talking time data, you're talking about how can we better utilize those people in other ways. Are there other things on the project that we can slide over to those individuals? Are there other things in the organization that we can slide over to those individuals? Are there just other ways we can keep them productive while we find them work? So listen, as long as you set good expectations, communicate them well, gain alignment with your team, create a process first, implement the tool second, and then you use it. You're continuing to use the outputs for these very tedious inputs such that the team understands that there's real benefit here. I can promise you, not only are you going to have a successful time tracking process, but you will have a successful, profitable, repeatable, and sustainable agency that's generating good project margins and solid gross margins now and into the future. That's all I've got for now. Good luck.